If we revisit the old versions, fairy tales were never simple or as gentle as we mistakenly believe. In the Cinderella of the Brothers Grimm, the two stepsisters had to cut their own feet to fit the shoe. The Little Mermaid in Andersen's fairy tale had to endure pain like knives with every step, only to eventually dissolve into sea foam. Or like in Vietnamese fairy tales, Tam took revenge by having Kem boiled in water, then soaked in fish sauce and sent to the stepmother. Those bloody, haunting endings are the original darkness that fairy tales once carried within them, before undergoing a process of editing and adaptation, being polished to become lullabies for children. The Ugly Stepsister, the latest live-action version inspired by fairy tales, has actively rekindled the eerie essence, the inherent thorniness of classic stories, retelling the old tale from the perspective of the antagonist. Cinderella's Ugly Stepsister. The film made a strong impression on audiences, thanks to its profound message and bold approach, combining dark comedy and body horror within a fairy tale plot, faithful to the spirit of fairy tales for adults. The Ugly Stepsister exposes the cruel truth about social prejudices, the obsession with beauty, and the imposed standards on women. What did a character, originally an evil supporting role, have to go through to win the spotlight for herself? Is it only beautiful and gentle princesses who have the privilege of becoming the main character? What about those who are ordinary or ugly? Today, let's step into the thorny fairy tale world with Fifim in The Ugly Stepsister to see what makes this movie more special compared to recent adaptations. The Ugly Stepsister has an opening not much different from the original. Only instead of focusing on the beautiful Cinderella, the lens turns to Elvira, the daughter of the stepmother, Rebecca. After her ex-husband passed away, Rebecca remarries an older man, a widower, hoping for wealth and status. She brings her two daughters, Elvira and Alma, to live in her new husband's house, along with his daughter Agnes. After the wedding ceremony, Agnes's father suddenly vomits blood and dies unexpectedly at the dinner table. Rebecca is now rightfully the controller of the entire house. But only now do Rebecca and her mother realize the truth. Like Rebecca, Agnes's father remarried for money. An entire large mansion is left with nothing, except for a few small coins. Rebecca is too fake and faded to find a new wealthy husband. The youngest daughter, Alma, is too young, not yet of age. Out of options, she can only place all her hopes on Elvira, the eldest daughter with a somewhat plump and coarse appearance. Right at this moment, news spreads from the palace. Prince Julian will hold a social gathering, inviting all young women across the kingdom to attend. Agnes and Elvira are both registered, and so, each member of the family harbors their own schemes, especially Rebecca, hoping her daughter will marry into wealth and nobility, bringing her fame and status. Agnes also refuses to accept a life of poverty, oppressed by her stepmother. She knows her striking beauty could attract the prince, so she refuses to be outdone, and does her best to win this noble position. As for Elvira, for a long time, she had harbored girlish, dreamy thoughts, secretly admiring the prince Julian through the poems he wrote. She, too, is determined to only marry a prince. But looking at her daughter's appearance, Rebecca knows Elvira can't even fasten a button, let alone stand a chance to marry into royalty. So, to make Elvira more attractive, she forces her daughter to undergo a series of terrifyingly painful cosmetic surgeries. The beauty war begins, where girls must compete, fight for a man, to gain love, recognition, wealth, and status. Beauty has always been an advantage. People often say, don't judge a book by its cover. But there's a harsh truth. An eye-catching cover can easily attract readers to explore the content inside. Beauty is often favored, while anything deviating from the ideal is quickly labeled ugly and suffers bitter injustices. In The Ugly Stepsister, This contrast is clearly shown through two characters, Agnes and Elvira, to expose the prejudices and divisions, the harsh standards that society imposes based on appearance. Right from the beginning of the film, Elvira is portrayed as an unattractive girl. She has a chubby face, buck teeth with braces, a crooked nose, a short and somewhat plump figure. Even so, Elvira is a pure and obedient girl. When she sees her mother faint and knows how dire the family's situation is, Elvira proactively tells her mother that she will get married, marry a rich man to help support the family. But what she receives in return are bitter words. Marry who? Prince? Look at yourself in the mirror. Knowing that her daughter doesn't have a pleasing appearance, Rebecca uses all the remaining money in the house to hire a doctor to fix Elvira's looks, ignoring the corpse of her new husband, rotting day after day without being buried. First, Elvira has her braces yanked out, with pliers as big as an arm. Then her crooked nose is placed on the chopping block. The doctor uses a chisel and a hammer to drive straight into her nasal bridge, with no anesthesia. Elvira's screams echo through the clinic, while Rebecca smiles contentedly as her plan moves forward, dreaming of a rich and prosperous future. Meanwhile, little sister Alma is completely shocked by the horrific scene before her, and by the madness of both her mother and sister. After the first surgery, Elvira must wear an iron nose brace every day. She even brings this cruel contraption to etiquette class in preparation for the upcoming royal ball. At this class, all the selected girls are trained in every gesture, how to walk, greet, and dance. Elvira shows real talent in dancing. She learns the movements quickly and gracefully, but because of her bizarre iron nose brace, she becomes the laughingstock of the class. The dance teacher moves her to the back row, the row reserved for girls like her, those with braces, considered not pretty. There, they endure the contemptuous gaze of the teacher. At home, Elvira is only allowed to eat a glass of diluted lemon water for dinner, just to lose weight, but still to be more beautiful. Elvira keeps trying every single day. Etiquette class in the morning, lemon water in the evening. Then came the day the list was announced. The list of girls chosen for the opening dance of the gala. Elvira went to see the list not expecting much. But to her surprise, the name at the bottom was crossed out and replaced with Elvira's. Rebecca bribed the academy to get her daughter in the opening dance. Elvira still thought her talent was recognized, and that's why she was on the list. But the next class shattered all her beliefs. That day's class, the dance teacher demonstrated the lead dancer's moves to the chosen girls. When asked if anyone could do it, all the students raised their hands, including Elvira. The teacher smiled mockingly, then called Elvira to dance in front of the class. Contrary to the teacher's expectations, Elvira performed the moves flawlessly, even though she'd only seen them once. Even so, the teacher stopped her. She grabbed Elvira's double chin and said she had talent, a wasted talent. Before Elvira could grasp the implication, the teacher bluntly stated she didn't need her. But because her mother bribed her, she let her in. Then she sent Elvira back to her seat and called Agnes to hammer the metal. At this point, Elvira understood that, no matter how talented, with this appearance, she'd always be looked down upon, not recognized. She could never compare to Agnes, tall and slender, fair-skinned, with flowing hair and a perfect face, destined to be the center of attention, something Elvira could never reach. Yet, in Elvira's darkest hour, another teacher at the academy listened to her and encouraged her. The teacher praised Elvira for daring to change her appearance, to become more beautiful. That was a kind of courage. Then took a small box and pressed it into Elvira's hand. The girl immediately took the small gift box to show her sister, Alma. It was a tapeworm egg. If Elvira just swallowed this egg, the tapeworm would live in her stomach, and she could eat as much as she wanted, and still lose weight. Once her body became slender, Elvira just needed to take the deworming medicine. to get the tapeworm eggs out and that's it. But Alma immediately retorted. She saw her sister as a sick person, becoming beautiful regardless of her health and life. But Elvira wouldn't listen. Despite Alma angrily leaving, Elvira still decided to swallow that egg. When Elvira got home, it was already late. While passing by the stables, Elvira suddenly heard strange noises. Curious, she stepped inside. She uncovered a shocking secret. Agnes was committing lewd acts with the stable hand. Despite being in love with Isaac, the family's longtime stable hand, Agnes was determined to marry the prince, to escape her stepmother's oppression, and gain status. This truth left Elvira deeply shaken, and she immediately told her mother. Agnes' actions had crossed the moral boundaries set for women of that era. Agnes was subjected to Rebecca's contempt and forced to be a servant for her and her 2 children. The name Cinderella also began to be used as Agnes' nickname. In the following days, Elvira's nose healed and the splint was removed. Thanks to the tapeworm in her stomach, her figure also became noticeably slimmer. But that wasn't enough for Rebecca. To be satisfied with her daughter, she kept throwing money at Elvira to get eyelash extensions. She was tied tightly to the operating chair. The doctor even used needles to sew the fake eyelashes onto her eyelids. The surgery was a success. Elvira returned to the academy as usual. But this time, the lead dancer Agnes was missing. Rebecca announced publicly that Agnes was bedridden due to the grief after her father's death. The teachers had no choice but to find a replacement. Elvira, now with a slender figure, a straight, high nose, and eyes still swollen but soon to heal with long, curved lashes, was finally chosen to replace Agnes. The gala was getting closer, but as Elvira's appearance became more beautiful, her body also started sending alarming signals. Hair falling out in clumps with every brush. Elvira couldn't help but panic at this result. But the doctor conjured up a gorgeous dress for her along with a wig to hide the bald patches on her head. And so, Elvira was ready to meet her Prince Charming. The painful surgeries, the societal scorn, and even her own family pushed Elvira onto a self-destructive path to reach a standard not meant for her. Accepting pain to change is a kind of courage, but sacrificing everything to chase meaningless standards is another matter. When beauty becomes a measure for society to grant privileges or inflict injustice, it's no longer a natural advantage, but gradually becomes a rigid mold that every woman is forced to squeeze herself into. When society values meaningless appearance standards, beautiful women receive preferential treatment. But that doesn't mean they have the right to control their own destiny. In the context of the ugly stepsister, women are treated no differently than merchandise, displayed for men to choose. Status is determined by the glamour of marriage. Women are put in a position where they must compete to be chosen because they rely on men to be allowed to step into the light of wealth, power, and prestige. That's also why Elvira and Agnes began to develop deep conflicts. Before that, despite some friction due to their awkward stepsister relationship, the 2 girls still maintained a superficial harmony. On nights when Elvira was tormented by the worm in her stomach, in so much pain she couldn't sleep, Agnes would bring her food. But as the gala drew nearer, their relationship deteriorated accordingly. On the eve of the ball, when Elvira caught Agnes with the gorgeous dress hidden away for so long, she didn't think twice. She lunged and tore it to shreds. Elvira always felt resentful for being overlooked in dance class while Agnes was favored. Jealousy always lingered in Elvira's mind, along with the fear that Agnes, with that beautiful face, would steal Prince Julian away. Only if Agnes couldn't make it to the ball would Elvira be confident that she'd be the most dazzling one and be chosen by the prince as his wife. The social event arrived. Elvira and her mother attended. Abandoning all the etiquette taught at the academy, Elvira obeyed her mother, hands clasped before her chest, letting out whimpers like a puppy, ready to obey any command. That grotesque difference drew every gaze of the men in the room, including Prince Chu, to the dance. In truth, even Prince Chu wasn't exactly decent or proper. He was a pervert in a virtuous guise. Before then, Elvira had caught the prince out with his entourage. He uttered vulgar words, completely different from the flowery, romantic phrases in the poetry collection Elvira always loved and never let go. When he saw Elvira's face, before she had her nose job, he scorned her and swore he'd never sleep with her. Such an ugly woman. But Elvira still swooned over her lover's handsome face in her dreams. Then, at the ball, when the prince saw Elvira in a completely different guise, stunningly beautiful, he was captivated again and chose to dance with her. The Prince Julian is just a lustful man, and Elvira is just a girl blinded by love, willing to trade everything for that infatuated feeling. But not long after the ball began. Just a moment ago the prince was praising Elvira's beauty. Then the next he immediately turned his gaze towards the door. Agnes stood there in a gorgeous dress, just like a fairy tale princess. After the dress was torn to shreds, Agnes desperately cried her eyes out beside the corpse of her father, rotting for days. Then suddenly, the fairy godmother's spirit appeared in the midst of a dream. Silkworms spun silk to reweave a dress for Cinderella. A pumpkin turned into a carriage. Mice transformed into carriage horses, and along with it, a pair of dainty little shoes. Agnes made it to the ball with the prince, while Elvira was left in disappointment and humiliation. Devastated, she ran outside in a whirlwind of emotions. Elvira vomited up a pile of tapeworm eggs, seeing what she had sacrificed, but it led to nothing. Elvira cried desperately, wanting to go home immediately, but Rebecca wouldn't allow it. So Elvira had to return to the ball, constantly dancing with dozens of men to please her mother. Then, when the music ended, Elvira saw Agnes's beautiful face next to the prince. She completely lost it. In that wife selection ball game, no one was a winner when every woman was turned into a commodity, valued based on beauty. They themselves were also caught in a fierce competition to avoid being devalued in the marriage and prestige market. Beauties like Agnes also have no right to decide their own fate but are just like a rare commodity bought by the rich and powerful. Those who crave love and recognition like Elvira are even more tragic. She had to pay with her body, their health, and even their self-respect to get a glance from a lecherous prince. These miserable women don't realize they don't need a man to bestow affection, recognition, power, status. What they really need is the freedom to decide their own lives. The ball ends just like the plot. Agnes must leave before midnight and drops a shoe at the palace. Prince Chu then declared that whoever fits the shoe will become his wife. Returning home after the chaotic ball, Elvira lunges to attack Agnes, but Rebecca and her young lover interrupt, and Agnes escapes. However, she dropped the other shoe. Elvira takes the shoe back to her room, looking at the dainty little shoe, unable to fit her clumsy foot into it. Elvira wept in bitter resentment. Then, in a moment of madness, she grabbed a knife herself and cut off the excess flesh from her foot to fit the shoe. When her toes were almost severed, Elvira hissed in agony, attracting the attention of her mother and sister. Rebecca gave her daughter medicine to calm down. Then she looked down at her daughter's foot and said, "You cut off the wrong foot, darling." The prince had the left shoe. How bitter. Elvira mustered all her courage to cut off one of her legs to fit the shoe. But in a panic, she mistakenly cut the leg of the shoe Agnes was holding instead of the shoe lost at the ball. And despite Rebecca's helpless gaze, Rebecca helped her daughter fix the remaining leg to fit the shoe. But in the end, the next morning when the trumpets announced the prince's arrival, Elvira woke up with a ravaged body. Her legs hurt so much she couldn't move. She tried to get out of bed but fell face first to the ground, chipping her entire set of teeth that had been braced for years. Elvira crawled inch by inch towards the door. She tumbled down the stairs, her newly straightened nose now broken and crooked to one side. Patches of her hair had fallen out. Her 2 severed feet were covered in blood. A twisted nose and a chipped set of teeth. Elvira was more ruined than she was at the start. Then, falling down the last step, she lay there, staring blankly as Agnes stepped out, slipped her foot into the shoe, and became the prince's wife. The tiny shoe that Elvira tried to squeeze her foot into is also a symbol of a standard, invisible beauty that all women are forced to fit into. from being forced by their mothers to become more beautiful to be able to marry into a good family, to swallowing tapeworm eggs knowing full well the health risks but relying on having an antidote, so they still try to swallow them. Eventually, Elvira chooses to cut off her own foot, a step with no turning back, because she believes that if she doesn't wear that shoe, she will never be loved or recognized. The horror scene is so realistic that the audience can't bear to watch. But there's an even more heartbreaking truth hidden behind it. To become beautiful according to standards to please others, Elvira is willing to destroy herself just to be loved, to be noticed, to be recognized. But in the end, Elvira still doesn't get the affection from the prince she secretly loves. Trying to change yourself for so long to please others never brings a good ending, but only makes us lose ourselves. After all, Alma offers to take Elvira away from this hellish place. Elvira agrees. She uses the antidote to expel the 10-meter-long tapeworm in her stomach, as if to remove the last shackle. Alma goes to her mother's room, takes the rest of her jewelry, then prepares horses for herself and Elvira. They leave before nightfall. Chasing beauty standards is a race with no end. No one can define what beauty is. So-called standards never really existed. Beauty is a feeling, and everyone has a different way of feeling beauty. Beauty has never been a fixed mold. So chasing beauty is like locking yourself into a mold that may become outdated over time. Beauty shouldn't be measured and judged because true beauty doesn't need AI approval. It exists in its own way for each person. Compared to recent adaptations, The Ugly Stepsister is doing particularly well in remaking a fairy tale, not dogmatic or empty, not shouting shallow slogans. The Ugly Stepsister delivers a consistent message throughout the work, condemning a society that worships beauty to the point of sickness, insanity, where women are turned into products to be consumed, repaired, even destroyed, as long as they please the eye. And in reality, we needn't look far in fairy tales. The glass slippers still exist in real life, in the form of strict standards of beauty, age, and ideal femininity. The line between self-care and obsession with pleasing others is very thin. The journey to freedom only truly begins when we stop forcing ourselves into molds, rigidly knowing how to love and cherish the body, the dignity of the life we have.